It is 7 p.m. The timer on the tablet went off 10 minutes ago, but the device is still glowing in your child's hands. You are tired. They are entranced. And in this moment, you feel that familiar, tightening knot of anxiety in your chest. You aren't just worried about the transition meltdown that is inevitably coming, you are worried about their brain. You are thinking about the headlines you read this morning about attention spans and dopamine loops. But then you remember the other article you read, the one about digital literacy and how coding is the new writing. We are parents living in the crosshairs of a massive, contradictory experiment. We want our children to be safe, but we also want them to be capable. We want to protect their childhoods, yet we are raising them in a world that is fundamentally digital. The tension is exhausting. But what if the answer isn't about finding the perfect number of minutes? What if the debate we are having is actually about something else entirely? For years, the conversation has been dominated by a single metric: time. How long? How much? When to stop? But in January 2026, the American Academy of Pediatrics released a policy statement that quietly shifted the ground beneath us. They moved the focus from a stopwatch to an ecosystem. This shift validates something many of us have suspected, but haven't quite known how to articulate: that how a child uses a screen matters infinitely more than how long they use it. Today, I want to take a step back from the panic and look at the research with a clearer head. We are going to explore 3 distinct parenting philosophies regarding screens: the case for strict limits, the practice of guided integration, and the tech-forward approach. We will look at the neuroscience, the sociology, and the trade-offs of each. My goal isn't to tell you which one is right, but to help you see which one actually fits the values of your specific home. Before we navigate these 3 paths, I want to invite you to join this community of thoughtful, inquiry-driven parents. If you are looking for sound bites or quick fixes, this might not be the space for you. But if you are interested in the nuance, in the messy, complex reality of raising humans in the modern age, please take a moment to subscribe. We are building a library of deep dives here, and I would love for you to be part of the conversation. Now, let's look at the first perspective, one that is rooted deeply in the biology of the developing brain. Let's begin with the philosophy of strict limits. This isn't just about nostalgia for a screen-free past. It is grounded in some very compelling and, frankly, sobering neuroscience regarding the first 2 years of life. We need to look at a landmark longitudinal study from the A-Star Institute for Human Development. They followed children from infancy through adolescence, scanning their brains at various intervals. What they found was fascinating. Infants with high screen exposure showed what researchers call accelerated maturation in visual processing areas. Now, accelerated sounds positive, like they are learning faster. But in brain development, faster isn't better. It's often a sign of stress or inefficiency. The brain specializes too quickly, cementing neural pathways for visual processing before the complex networks for deep thinking have had time to properly form. It is like paving a road before the foundation has settled. You get a surface that looks complete, but it creates structural issues down the line. Dr. Huang Pei, the lead author, notes that this premature specialization can limit flexibility later in life. So what does this accelerated but inefficient brain look like in the real world, years later? The data from that same study suggests a serial pathway. That infant screen time predicted slower decision-making at age 8 and increased anxiety by age 13. It appears that when the brain is forced to process rapid-fire visual stimuli too early, it trades depth for speed, and eventually, that trade-off manifests as a difficulty in regulating emotion and managing complex tasks. We see echoes of this in the NIH's massive ABCD study here in the United States, which found that high screen use was associated with thinning of the cortex, the area responsible for critical thinking. When we embrace the strict limits philosophy, particularly for the under twos, we are essentially trying to protect the brain's construction schedule. We are trying to ensure that the foundation is poured slowly, deliberately, and without the interference of hyperstimulating input that the young brain simply isn't evolved to process. However, we have to ask, is it the screen itself that is doing the damage, or is it what the screen is replacing? This brings us to the displacement hypothesis. A 2022 study tracked toddlers and found that the primary mechanism for developmental delay wasn't just the blue light, it was the loss of peer play. Every hour spent engaging with a device is an hour not spent stacking blocks, looking at a human face, or navigating the frustration of a toy that won't work. The trade-off of the strict limits approach is that it requires us, the parents, to fill that void. It places a tremendous burden on the caregiver to be the source of stimulation and regulation. If we remove the electronic pacifier, we must be present to soothe the child ourselves. This is biologically ideal, yes, but in a modern household without a village of support, it is also exhaustively difficult. The strict limits approach prioritizes biological protection, but the cost is often parental energy and capacity. So, where does this philosophy fit best? The consensus from the WHO to the most traditional pediatricians is that strict limits are essential for the first 18 to 24 months. This is that window of vulnerability where the brain is most plastic and most susceptible to that accelerated maturation we discussed. If you have an infant or a young toddler, the data suggests that 0 really is the target number, with the exception of video chatting with family, which is viewed as a social interaction rather than media consumption. But as children age, holding this line becomes increasingly complex. As they move towards school age, the screen starts to represent something else, a connection to their peers and a tool for learning. This leads us to our second school of thought. But before we move on, I want to introduce a counterintuitive thought. We often treat screens like they are a monolith, a single dangerous substance like sugar or tobacco. But is a child mindlessly swiping through cartoons the same as a child watching a science experiment and asking questions? What if the screen isn't the babysitter, but the bridge? This is where the black and white thinking of limits begins to fail us, and where the nuance of our next philosophy becomes vital. This brings us to guided integration. This philosophy argues that the toxicity of a screen is largely determined by the presence or absence of a human guide. The research here is incredibly empowering. A meta-analysis in JAMA Pediatrics found that when parents co-view, that is, watch alongside their children, the outcomes change entirely. Passive viewing was linked to a 6 times higher likelihood of communication delays. But interactive co-viewing, that was associated with improved language skills. The philosophy here is that the parent's role is to scaffold the experience. We are there to bridge the video deficit, that developmental gap where young children struggle to transfer what they see on a screen to the real world. When we sit with them and say, "Look at that red truck, does that look like your truck?" we are turning a passive stream of data into an active learning experience. We are turning the screen into a book. There is no better example of this shift than the story of Dr. Dimitri Christakis. He was one of the authors of the original strict no screens before 2 guidelines. His early work showed that TV exposure increased attention problems, but as the iPad era arrived, he realized the guidelines were obsolete. He famously noted, "We can't possibly treat video chatting with grandma the same way we treat watching Power Rangers." This realization catalyzed the AAP's 2016 revision. In the real world, guided integration relies on what Lisa Guernsey calls the 3 C's: content, context, and child. It asks us to stop counting minutes and start analyzing the ecosystem. Is the content slow-paced and educational? Is the context a shared family moment or a solitary isolation? And does this specific child handle it well? It's a move from how long to how. It acknowledges that a family movie night is fundamentally different from a child doom-scrolling alone in a dark room. However, just like strict limits, guided integration comes with a hidden cost. It removes the break. For many parents, the screen is the only tool that allows them to cook dinner, shower, or decompress. Guided integration says, no, you need to be there too. It transforms the screen from a babysitter into a co-parenting activity. It requires us to model the behavior we want to see. The Canadian Pediatric Society calls this the model aspect of their 4M framework. We have to look at our own phone usage. We have to be the ones to press pause and ask the question. This is mentally taxing. It denies us the ability to check out while our children are plugged in. The trade-off here is that we preserve the developmental benefits of technology, but we lose the convenience of it. We are asking parents to be digital mentors, which is yet another job description added to an already overflowing list. Guided integration shines brightest in the preschool years, roughly ages 2 to 5. This is when children are old enough to benefit from high-quality educational content. Think Sesame Street or slow-paced nature documentaries, but are still young enough to need that social scaffolding to make sense of it. It is for the family that wants to use technology as a tool for connection rather than separation. It's for the parent who is willing to sit through an episode of a cartoon to turn it into a conversation. It effectively neutralizes the isolation that strict limits try to prevent by ensuring the screen is never a solo activity. But let's push this further. Both of the philosophies we've discussed so far view the screen as something to be managed, limited, or mitigated. They view the screen as a potential hazard. But there is a third school of thought that asks a radically different question. What if we aren't protecting them from a hazard, but blocking them from a language? What if limiting access to technology today is the equivalent of limiting access to books in the 19th century? This leads us to the tech-forward path. The tech-forward philosophy is best articulated by Mitchell Resnick of the MIT Media Lab. He argues that the goal shouldn't be to shield children from technology, but to ensure they become creators rather than just consumers. He draws a sharp distinction between interacting with technology, like pressing buttons on a toy, and creating with it, like coding a game in Scratch. His research suggests that when children use screens to design, build, and express themselves, they are engaging in the highest form of learning. This approach views the digital world not as a media consumption device, but as a studio. It leverages the 4 P's of creative learning: projects, passion, peers, and play. In this view, a child editing a video or building a complex world in Minecraft isn't wasting time on a screen. They are developing modern literacy. They are learning the fluency of the 21st century. Dr. Jordan Shapiro takes this even further, describing digital spaces as the new playground. He argues that a sandbox is a context, a classroom is a context, and a video game is also a context. Social-emotional skills, negotiation, leadership, empathy, are being practiced in these digital lobbies just as they were on the kickball field. When we embrace the tech-forward reality, we stop seeing the device as a barrier to play and start seeing it as the place of play. Research backs this up. Studies on digital creativity tools show positive effects on flexibility and expressiveness. The reality of this approach, however, requires a high tolerance for messiness. It means allowing children to make mistakes online. It means engaging with them in their video games, not just monitoring time limits. It looks like a living room where the parents are playing Mario Kart with the kids, teaching sportsmanship and digital integrity in real time, rather than banning the console entirely. The trade-off here is significant, and it is one we cannot ignore. While we want our children to be creators, the platforms they use are often designed by companies that want them to be addicted consumers. The tech-forward parent is constantly battling engagement-driven design, infinite scrolls, autoplay, and algorithmic recommendations designed to override a child's agency. By opening the door to the digital playground, we also open the door to commercial exploitation and data privacy risks. The AAP's 2026 statement warns specifically about these design features undermining child autonomy. To take a tech-forward path requires a high level of digital literacy from the parent. You have to understand the settings, the privacy laws, and the hidden mechanics of the games your children are playing. It is not a passive yes to screens. It is an active, vigilant engagement with the software itself. This approach is the best fit for school-age children and adolescents who show a specific passion or aptitude. If you have a child who loves to build, who wants to edit videos, or who connects deeply with friends through gaming, the tech-forward approach allows you to lean into that strength. It frames the screen as a tool for agency. It is for the family that believes the risks of digital life are best managed through exposure and guidance, rather than avoidance. It prepares the child for a future where digital fluency is as essential as reading and writing. So we have 3 roads. The strict limit road, which protects the developing hardware of the brain. The guided integration road, which uses the screen as a bridge for connection. And the tech-forward road, which views the screen as a canvas for creation. Which one is right? The answer, frustratingly and beautifully, is that they all are. But they are right at different times, for different children, and even at different times of the day. This brings us to the synthesis, the framework that the AAP and modern researchers are now pointing us toward. The AAP's 2026 paradigm shift asks us to stop looking at the child in isolation and start looking at the digital ecosystem. This means acknowledging that a child's relationship with screens is influenced by their temperament, their family stress levels, and the design of the apps they use. It moves us away from a one-size-fits-all rulebook. Dr. Jenny Radeski, who led the development of these new guidelines, emphasizes that we need to look at socio-ecological systems. This sounds academic, but it is actually deeply practical. It means admitting that on a Tuesday, when you are sick and the weather is terrible, a strict limit approach might fail, and that is okay. It implies that screen use is fluid. It validates the idea that we can be strict limit parents with our toddlers, guided integration parents with our preschoolers, and tech-forward mentors to our teenagers. We do not have to pick a single tribe and stay there forever. This synthesis is supported by what is known as the Goldilocks Hypothesis. Researchers from Oxford and Cardiff analyzed over 120,000 adolescents and found something that contradicts the fear-mongering. The relationship between screen time and well-being isn't a straight line downwards. It is U-shaped. Children with 0 screen use actually reported lower well-being than those with moderate use. The sweet spot, where well-being was maximized, was actually around 4 hours for computers and 1 hour for smartphones on weekdays. This suggests that moderate digital use is not just not harmful, but potentially advantageous in a connected world. It facilitates social connection and goal pursuit. The danger lies at the extremes. Total deprivation cuts them off from their peers, while excessive use displaces sleep and physical activity. We are looking for that middle ground, that just right amount of engagement that enhances life without consuming it. So, how do we turn this into action on a Tuesday night? The most effective tool we have is the Family Media Plan. This isn't a contract of thou shalt nots. It is a statement of values. It starts with prioritizing the non-negotiables: sleep, physical play, and face-to-face family meals. Once those buckets are filled, the remaining time can be used for screens in a way that aligns with your child's age and interests. It allows you to customize the rules. Maybe your family values movie nights, guided integration, but bans social media until 16, strict limits. Maybe you allow unlimited coding time, tech forward, but zero YouTube on weekdays. The plan works because it puts values first and rules second. It changes the conversation from, you have used up your minutes, to, have we done the things that matter most to us today? As we close, I want to leave you with this. The guilt we feel about screens often comes from a belief that we are failing a test. We look at the glowing rectangle and we see our own inadequacy. But what if we looked at it with curiosity instead of fear? What if we stopped asking, how much is too much, and started asking, what is this doing for my child right now? Is it calming them, teaching them, isolating them, connecting them? The screen is just a tool. It is powerful, yes, and it requires respect. But it is not the enemy. You are the expert on your child. You know when their eyes look glazed over, and you know when they light up with a new idea. Trust that observation more than you trust the timer. If you found this exploration helpful, please share which of these 3 perspectives, strict limits, guided integration, or tech forward, resonates most with your current season of parenting in the comments. I read them all, and I learn from them. Until next time.